All right, you grasshoppers, we are back at it with the great, the one and only Mark Puttenvink. Again, worthy to introduce him again. He used to be a strength and conditioning coach with the Rangers, worked with the New England Patriots, has a company now called Patriot Training Systems. The one and only, the stud man, the great Mark Puttenvink. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, Tom. How's your Easter?
It's good. Yeah, didn't do a whole lot. My sons are 30 and 27, so we hung out and had a couple cocktails. With the oldest one yesterday, and it's funny because everybody's locked down, so we see each other like there's nothing new to talk about. So we're sitting there for 15 minutes. Okay, what are we going to do now?
Staring at each other.
It was good. Yeah, we're not Easter isn't a big holiday. Our big holidays are Christmas and Thanksgiving. Sure. So yeah. How about you? Good time?
Same thing. Yeah, we just kind of. I actually worked out in the morning. I met up with a friend of mine. We did a boxing workout in the gym. And then came home and then we just had dinner here and very quiet. Again, my kid, both of my boys live in New York City. One actually worked yesterday. He's a bartender at a really big restaurant in the city. Oh. And the other guy, he was out in the park doing his workout or whatever.
Oh, cool. All right. So we you and I talk about training a lot, and you train lots of people. You train anywhere from housewives to Navy SEALs, and you've done a lot of boxing, so you train boxers and all that too. So obviously, I think even more so during this pandemic, nerves are a little bit frazzled, right? And you maybe get a little road rage or something going on. And I've seen people. I was actually at the beach where I march every morning, and I saw a dad almost getting into a confrontation with another dad. The kids are standing there scared to death. So I think I'll let you explain it more. But the bottom line for us is, I think it's even easier because we have been in confrontations before. You don't need, if something is happening, you want to do everything you can to not get into a confrontation. But if you do have to get into a confrontation, then, if you defend yourself, then you have to do it. So you got some theories on that. The term you used, I remember before the show, was to avoid the confrontation. What terms were you using again?
Yeah. So first of all, there's a stat, and it's research based, that 100% of fights you don't get into, you're going to win.
Yeah.
And that's the key. So before we start and we talk about the actual event, we need to clarify or define what types of violence there are. There's two basic types of violence. One is social violence, and the other one is antisocial violence. And the difference between those are, social violence is I bump into you, you look, we have words, and we get at it. The rule on social violence is that within 3 days of social violence, if you're in the hospital, incarcerated, or you're dead, it's not worth it. So social violence although it's very difficult to avoid for men, especially because we all have huge egos, like, what are you looking at kind of thing, to be avoided at all costs. However, if I come up behind you and stick a knife or a gun in your back and say, hey, buddy, give me your wallet, that's antisocial violence. At that point, you're totally justified in any actions you have to take. When your life, or your primarily your life, but maybe a family member or a friend is threatened, then you have to react. But the hierarchy of the steps to avoid those antisocial violence events are avoidance is number one. And we'll talk about that in a minute, how you can avoid. If you can't avoid, then escape is number two. And if you can't escape, number three is de-escalation or tactical communications. And we'll explain in a little bit greater detail what that is. And then if all those three opportunities are gone, then you have to confront it in some manner physically.
Right. I had a confrontation at the gym probably 3 or 4 years ago. And a guy I knew was in there, like a real bodybuilder, looked like he was on some extra juice or whatever. And he and his wife were going there all the time. And we were friends. And she was actually like 8 months pregnant when the incident happened, and she was at the gym by herself, and she came in kind of like, oh, I feel terrible. And I said, oh, look, man, you look great. I clearly was not trying to hit on her. She was 8 months pregnant and wife of a friend. So time went on. She had a baby, and we were in the gym one day, and I was joking around with him as I usually do. And she must have told him the story of what I said. And I think he got on the wrong medication or whatever, and he confronted me, and he says, you need to apologize to my wife. And my initial reaction was just like you said. It was like, I'm not letting this meathead push me around. Like, there's other people watching. I've got to rep Tom Laidlaw. I can't let that happen, But then I started saying to myself, okay, let's hit this straight. If I beat this guy up in the gym, it's going to make the newspapers. Here I'm building this true grit life and doing all this stuff, and that's going to be fantastic. All it's going to be said is that Tom Laidlaw get into beat up a guy at the gym, or worse yet, I get beat up by him, which would be even worse. So I said, listen, if I said anything that was inappropriate, I apologize, and walked away. Now, the other problem was, you're right, the male ego. I would see these guys at the gym all the time, and it's just gnawed at me for a while. And I finally said to myself, no, I did the right thing. I don't go to that gym anymore anyways. But it was tough to back.
It could be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
In fact, last week, there was an incident in New York City. A 25-year-old firefighter and a 35-year-old firefighter and a 55-year-old citizen got into it in an Irish bar. And they were out in front like 4 a.m. Now, we all know anything after midnight is not good.
Yeah.
And the younger man, the firefighter, hit the guy. And when he did, the guy fell back, hit his head on the back of his head on the pavement, went into convulsions, had a cardiac, unfortunately passed away.
Oof.
So now this is a prime example how social violence can really go sideways on you. Again, alcohol involved. I'm sure I wasn't there, but I mean 4 a.m. and and obviously some poor judgment. And now this young man was immediately suspended by NYFD and could be looking at a manslaughter charge. And it can happen just that easily. Now, had it been an anti-social violence, because the legislation is written to support anti-social violence reaction. If it had been different and the guy put a knife to his back and he spun around and hit the guy and the guy was killed, well, it was justifiable. Even that said, if I swing on you in a social context, and you swing back, and then you take me and you slam my head against the wall repeatedly. So there's escalation of threat. I can't, when I shove you, if we're being stupid and we're in social violence, confrontation, I shove you and you come back and you hammer me 10 times and I got a problem physically, then that's an escalation of violence. Avoid it at all costs. And again, I know it's really tough for men more than women. Women can kind of maneuver through life without getting in those situations. Yeah.
There's also been a couple of incidents lately where Asian people have been attacked on the streets.
Right.
And one woman, an elderly woman, I think she's like 65 years old, was outside a hotel. You saw the story, and was getting beat up by this guy, and nobody came to help him or nobody came to help her. So that in that kind of situation, first of all, I think it's incumbent upon the male. You have to step in there.
Absolutely.
But I guess then the question is, how do you step in so you can de-escalate, but also save the woman that's being attacked?
Right. Well, first of all, at the very least, you should call law enforcement. At the very least, dial 911. They did nothing. They stood there and they just watched. It's a situational experience, and it all depends on what exactly is going on, how to react to it physically. But in most cases, you should be able to do something. And that's why it's important. We talk about working out. Why do we work out? Longevity and health, saving your own life, and maybe saving someone else's life by being able to intercede. So that's one thing. I encourage everybody of all ages, and it's never too late to start, to practice a martial art for the following reasons. First of all, you may get into a situation, if you know one or two things, that may save your life. I'm not suggesting everybody goes out and becomes a black belt or becomes a professional boxer, but if you know, and this is in fact how we teach law enforcement and tactical military. We don't teach you to fight to the 7th and 8th and 9th round. We teach you to stop something immediately with one or two moves that are gross motor skill movements that you can do evolutions of, that you repeat. And when we teach survival skills, whether it's the general public, law enforcement, or military, we talk about two things primarily. The first one is threat recognition, and that's to be able to identify the threat. And the second one is have a conditioned response, not a reaction, but an action. If you're reacting, it's too late. So threat recognition, number one, being able to recognize the threat, and then having a conditioned or practiced response to that threat to neutralize that threat.
All right. So somebody's there. Let's say I'm walking down the street and I see this man beating up this elderly Asian woman. Now the adrenaline gets pumping, right? I mean, anybody that's been in a confrontation, that's part of the issue, is containing yourself, controlling yourself, thinking clearly. So in that case, probably you want to try to scare him away first, right? Verbally scare him away. And probably in most cases you will. But if he doesn't then leave, so now you've got to do something. And you don't want to put your own life at risk, but you want to stop him from attacking that woman.
Right. So we could talk for hours on options, but the first one was absolutely correct. Scream. Right. Hey, police are on the way, let her go, whatever, or whatever. Don't identify yourself as any law enforcement if you're not, but say police are on the way. I just called it in. They'll be here in 10 seconds. Get off of her. If he doesn't, and this is a very simple premise to think of in all of self-defense, you want to take out the computer. You want to take out the head. Now, there's various ways to do it. So maybe you're a 120-pound woman. You say, well, how am I going to, somebody, Tom Laidlaw's side, a guy that was 200 some odd pounds, what could I do? Well, I don't care if you're 220 or 420 or 120. If you get somebody in the eyeball, the perpetrator has no other reaction but to pull back in reflex. It's just like if you stuck your hand in a fire, you're going to pull back. You get somebody in the eyes, they're going to pull back. So that's number one. So there again, that's why I teach self-defense classes to women, to men as well, to kids. If it's not me, find somebody who can teach you this. Again, practice a martial art or take some self-defense class that you have some ability to do something. But
and I hate to say it like this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I learned to fight, you're in it to win it. So if you're going to get into a confrontation, if that's your last resort, you've tried everything else, and now you have to get into that physical confrontation. Yeah. You have to go hard, right? I mean, you can't.
Tom, you hit it on the head. That's 100% correct. So when we talk about survival skill, again, the concept is I'm not looking to box and maybe win on points. I want to stop this guy, this perpetrator right now. So again, let's talk about that woman who weighs 120 pounds or 102 pounds and says, hey, the guy's 230 pounds. I want you to understand this concept. If that 230-pound man was sitting there with a little baby kitten and petting the kitten, and that 102-pound woman came up and poured a glass of ice water on that kitten, what is that kitten going to do? It's going to react. It's going to scratch it. And that's the mindset, because your life is on a line. So you have to give, we use the term GLF, go like, fill in the blank. And that's the mentality you have to have. There are times when I'm teaching women. So for instance, there's a strike you could use with your forearm to the carotid. You hit somebody here hard enough, either with a hammer fist or with a hack from the forearm, you temporarily disrupt that flow, that there's a blood pressure drop. You're not going to knock the guy out, but he's going to drop to his knees and give you a chance to get to escape. So when I'm teaching women and men to do this on a heavy bag and they're hitting it half-heartedly, I said, listen, all you're going to do is aggravate the guy. You've got to get that intensity. And so people say, well, I'm not that person, but you are. And you have to mentally kind of think at that point. And we teach this to law enforcement too, military. When you're in that situation, think of a survival. A survival mentality of what is the most important thing in my life? I want to protect that. And generally speaking, it's your family.
Yep.
So if you're out of the equation, it's a horrible situation for your family. So don't think about yourself. Think about your loved ones. And you'll find, there's nothing, especially when it comes to women, don't get near their children. Don't get near a cub, because the mama bear will tear you to shreds. And that's the mindset. And it really incorporates a lot of mindset, Tom.
Right. And it's like you say, you're right. It is a mindset, right? So in normal training, let's say you want to bench press 315 pounds. Well, you obviously have to, you can only bench press 135 right now. Well, you have to train to get up to that 315 pounds, right? You just can't go in the gym and all of a sudden lift 315 pounds. So it's the same thing like you said before. If you want to be able to protect yourself and be somewhat under control, you train yourself. You train in self-defense, whatever. And I know, like you said before, we don't want everybody running out there and becoming black belts in karate or whatever. And again, chances are you may never have to use it. But if you ever do have to protect yourself, if you have some training, now you're going to say to yourself, now your mind is giving yourself that confidence to be able to do what you need to do, because you know that you've trained yourself. If you haven't done the training, you can be a big, strong guy, but if you've never been in a confrontation before, you don't know what you're doing, right? Yeah.
So Tim Larkin, who's out in Las Vegas, and he was naval intelligence, and he's also a martial artist, and he's got a very good business running out there. Target target focused training, but he talks about, just that understanding that and the big difference is that the social to antisocial. When it's antisocial, you have to do everything in your power. And the first thing is remove the computer, and the second thing is, again, learn very basic movements, whether it's a hack or a hammer fist, an eye gouge, or an elbow to the face. You don't want to learn techniques. You want to learn concepts, and it's a big difference. And if you really want to be secure and being able to think, I could probably protect myself, look at the UFC, all right? They have 36 rules. If you can break all 36, you're going to be safe. So like a rule would be eye gouging or punching to the throat. Those are against the rules. So if you look at all 36 things in UFC that are against the rules, and if you can learn 2 or 3 of those, you're going to be at a much better place in life and being safe.
Yeah.
And the big thing, Tom, is the threat recognition. So there's a pattern of criminality. When someone is looking to rob you or set you up for something, whether it's 1 or 2 people, let's talk about one person. That person may do a host of different things. So let's say you sit at the bus stop and there's a guy sitting over there. You're the only 2. All of a sudden he picks up and he sits like closer to you. That's called mirroring, shadow. That's a clear indication he's up to no good. If he's walking down the street and he's on the other side of the street and you're here and he starts to come across the street, obviously that's a threat. If there's 2 men walking down the street, I see you and they stop to communicate, that's another bad sign. What they'll do, they come up and they'll say, hey, sir, what time is it? That's what we call the interview process. That's when the interview begins. There are other things, especially when it's a male on a female, they may say, hey, listen, when we talk about sexual assault, hey, I know you're far too pretty to me to ever think of dating a guy like me. That's trying to soften you up. And one thing that we talk about is that charm is different from niceness. Right. Niceness is an ability we have to be a nice person, but to charm somebody, you're working them.
Right.
So there's a big distinction there.
So let's say walking down the street and you get a sense that there's something going on. This guy's walking towards me, there's something going on. Mm-hmm. So my first reaction is, now I'm bigger, right? Yeah. And I got the big bald head and square jaw and all that kind of stuff. So my first reaction, if I think something's going on, I make eye contact. I'm letting him know I'm eyeballing you. Yeah. I'm not some guy that you should be messing with. I don't say anything to him, but I'm giving him a look like, okay, I'm here. Now, not everybody can do that. Not everybody is, can intimidate that way. But what do you think? Look them in the eye or no?
Here's the thing, Tom. You just hit on something that's so important. So I got certified as a professional threat analyst a while back. And one of the things that we learned was I think in 1981, there were 2 sociologists and psychologists that did a study. They went to New York City, and for 3 days straight, they took a very busy intersection and they just videotaped people walking. It was a whole bunch of people. They went to the penal institution and they got the most violent criminals. They got about a dozen of them. And they said, I want you to watch these videos and I want you to write down or circle who you would assault and who you would avoid. And this is research that backs up common sense. The people that walk tall and had their chest out and had a sense of purpose on the way they were walking, were to be completely avoided by the criminals. And these were violent criminals. The people that looked at their feet, and if you're walking at me and if I stepped over to the side to let you through, those behavior patterns, totally vulnerable. Right. So yes, there's a huge component to just what you said. Stand tall, walk with a purpose, look them down. And then the second thing, so there's an OODA loop, which is a fancy term for observe, orientate, decide, and act. And we do it all day long. When you're driving a car, you orientate, you see a guy cutting your lane, you move over, things of that nature. But when a criminal's coming up or someone with bad intent, they have an OODA loop. Okay, this is what I'm going to do to this big guy. I'm going to distract him and go for his wallet. Right. If he's about 30 feet away and you go, Joe, how the hell are you, man? I haven't seen you since college. You interrupted his OODA loop. It's going to throw him off. Right. And that gives you a chance to do what? Escape. Tom, you're a big guy. You've been in more fights than I can imagine. And I've been in a few. Point is, we don't want to fight anymore unless you're getting paid for it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And so you take off. So that's that avoidance. avoidance is part of that being able to identify the threat, then the escape. And then if you can't, let's say you're up, then you de-escalate. Hey man, what do you want? So here's something I tell people to do. Right now, I carry in my pocket cash and a fake wallet. And in that fake wallet, I may put my library card, things of that nature. My other wallet, so to speak, that has my credit card, all the things that can be used for property theft or identification, I keep secure in a different part of my body. So if I ever get somebody stick a gun or a knife in my face, or a couple guys come up, I throw the cash. I go, guys, listen, I don't want a problem. Here, take it. And they're going to reach for it. And that gives me a chance to get out of Dodge. All right. And now I thought, you know.
All right. So some guy comes up to you, then puts a gun right in your face, right up close to you. Do you go for the gun? Do you try to swat away? Yeah. So that's kind of a mistake by somebody. Like, versus if you had a gun and you ever had to defend yourself, you don't ever want to go close to somebody, do you? You need to stay away from them.
Oh, if they have a weapon, stay as far as you can. And one thing, and again, it depends where you are, but always assume that they have a weapon, whether it's a knife or a gun. Now, with a knife, it's a little bit different because, they don't want to go to jail. They're looking for a payday. They kill you, they don't get what they want.
Right.
So if they put a knife out, chances are they're not going to attack you unless you try to threaten them physically. Right. We're kind of getting to a different area here, but they want their payday. They want what they want from you. Now, if it's not a crime of possession, but it's a crime of say sexual assault, then you have to fight. Then you have to do what you have to do to protect yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody does stick that gun right in your face and you've got a chance to go for the gun, they're trying to harm you some way. Like you're thinking, like, this guy's going to shoot me.
Yeah. So there's things you can learn in the martial arts, and there's, whether it's what I study, Filipino martial arts, whether it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Krav Maga, the variant of judo, there are things you can do. Is it foolproof? No, but it's better to have a plan of action than just reaction. And the worst thing you could do, this is a saying we use: you live, if you move, you live; if you freeze, you die.
So, all right. So I watched the movies. So what movie was I watched? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. And gun goes in the guy's face. He reaches up and actually just grabs the gun and twists it out of the guy's hand. Yeah. Makes it look really easy in the movie. Is that easy to do? A
lot easier. Everything's easier in the movie, but that's again, there's in my martial art, which is Filipino, we do a hand scissors called a gunting. So here's the weapon. I want to push it away from me with this hand. I'm going to grab it and try to turn it in. Again, there's varying techniques you can use. Are they foolproof? No, but give yourself a chance.
Right. Yeah. So same thing with a knife, though. If you feel like he's going to stab you, it's a different story with a knife, right? It's harder to grab the knife. It's
actually more dangerous in some respects, especially in close quarters, like say in a hallway. There's a 21-foot rule that the FBI did a bunch of research, and 21-foot rule for law enforcement is that if someone pulls a knife on you within 21 feet and they come charging, you do not have time to pull out your handgun. You'll be bleeding by the time you get that thing. Yeah. So we teach in fact, we're doing another one this coming Sunday. If you ever want to come, it's a great day with some really serious men. And so we do a lot of knife disarms. Again, is it foolproof? No, there's a good chance you're going to get cut. But are you going to get killed? That's the question. And you may get cut on the way towards that disarm, but you want to neutralize and escape. So that's what we teach. We teach neutralize the weapon, push off, and then escape with your handgun out on an angle.
So just to be clear, everybody, too, we want to make sure that everybody's just joining us, that we're saying, listen, we don't want you to get into a confrontation. No. You do everything you can to avoid a confrontation. You do everything you can to get away from somebody bad that's trying to hurt you. But if you do need to protect yourself, then you need to protect yourself. Let me ask you about home. You're in your home and you've got a weapon, you've got a gun in your home, and some guy comes in. I mean, again, you're still using the same logic, right? You're going to say to him, listen, I have a gun and I will kill you if I have to. You need to leave now. Yeah.
So, I mean, and this is, go state by state. Number one, know your laws, because there are, each state has different laws in terms of when you can use a weapon in your home. It's called the Castle Doctrine. And you should really be familiar with those. And then it becomes, is it a handgun? Is it a rifle? Is it a shotgun? Some people will say, well, it's a shotgun. because you don't have to be accurate. The problem with that is you may not neutralize that guy.
Right.
And there's collateral. It's like you don't want to hit your wife or your children, right? Because it does spray. With a rifle, again, I mean, if you know, when we went out that day and we were firing that SIG and the ARs, they'll go through a wall. So if you miss the dude, you may kill your neighbor or your son or your daughter in another room, right? So there's a lot of considerations when it comes into that. And I think the best way to avoid that situation is just to avoid. And by that, I mean, there's a whole nother seminar I give on your home. And I won't give you the whole, I'll just give you a global vision. You have to think as the bad person. If I'm going to break into my house, what are my avenues of access? What is the best time? You know, what, so here's an easy one. I have a big window here, right? And we put a big piece of furniture in front of it. So yeah, somebody could smash that window, but they got to get by that piece of furniture. Also, everybody, if you're building a new home or an existing home, every window that is street level, so to speak, somebody can get through very easily, you should plant very thorny bushes in there. Make them look cool. But there's things that you can do that really, you know, because one out of 4 home burglaries is a home invasion, meaning that there's someone in the house. 1 out of 36 homes gets burglarized.
How much was the number there? 1 out of
36. Now, there's things you could do now. So it's kind of what this, and I hate to fall back on the SEALs, but I read a great book just dealing with this. And when they plan a mission, they look at critical assets. So what are your critical assets? Your family, usually, your pets. What's the critical times? All right, well, I leave for work at this time. The wife goes to the gym at this time. The kids are in school from here to here. Areas of access, garage, you know, door from inside the garage, how many doors in the house, and also how many, when we talk about access, how close are you to a major highway? What are the roads of access to your home? Do you live on a dead end? There's a lot of things, but you can chart all that stuff out and come up with a plan. The other thing, Tom, is how many people, you know, there's another way. It's a home invasion. It's called a fire. How many people run a fire drill in their home with a family? How many times do your kids, once a month, they do a fire drill? Why? Because then it's an action as opposed to a reaction.
And where are your fire extinguishers? Are they accessible? Are they filled up? You know.
And if you live in a, so we have stairs here, right? Goes up and then goes up. I counted them. Why? Because if there's a fire upstairs and I have to get low and I'm crawling down those stairs, I want to know how many stairs there are, how many steps there are.
It is like we don't want people to get paranoid, but same thing if you're at a restaurant or wherever it is, you need to know where the exits are too. Right? You know, be aware of that stuff. So it's simple. You don't have to make a big presentation about it. Just when you walk in, just look around yourself, find out where all
the biggest when I talk about either a fire or an active shooter in a restaurant, the best place is right to the kitchen, because it's a large building. There are large areas of exit because they get deliveries. If you go to the front door in a fire, we call it the fatal funnel, because everybody runs there. And you look at most tragic incidents, whether it's nightclubs, that's where you find the bodies piled. That's
true. Yeah, very true. I got to tell you, funny, my shotgun story. Way back when I was playing with the Rangers, I was living nearby and had a mouse in the house. So I put a mouse trap underneath in the kitchen sink. In the middle of the night, I started hearing this banging and everything. You know, I'm thinking somebody's in my house. You know, you're half asleep, but so I didn't have a gun or anything like that. So I'm like, "Hey, who's out there? You know, I've got a gun here." And I'm waiting to hear more noises. Then it was the mouse, obviously, but the mouse would move around a little bit more. "Hey, I hear you in there." You know, it should have videoed it. If somebody could have videoed it, it would have been hilarious. So this goes on for like 15 minutes, and I finally go. I think to myself, well, let's go check the mouse trap. There's the mouse dead. And I was fired up. I was like hiding, and I was yelling. And somebody had heard me. It was pretty funny.
I had a friend of mine. He had a 357 Magnum in his bedstand, and he had this alarm system, security system in his home, that if there was an intruder, you know, throughout the house there'd be little screens that would track where the bad guy was, the intruder, right? So he was out for dinner with his wife, had a few drinks, and he came home, and it starts flashing. Pulls out his 357. He makes his way out of the bedroom, and he's going down, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, I got locked and loaded. I got a 357. You better stop. You better stop." And he makes a turn. And what it was he had a birthday party for his daughter that day. and the air conditioning was blowing around one of those helium balloons.
Oh, okay.
But the scary part is that could have went sideways on him too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're talking about. Why you really need to have a plan. And listen, if you're going to get a handgun or a rifle, by all means,
Train.
Go to a qualified trainer and train. Don't go to like a 2-hour seminar and leave it alone. Go periodically, like any other skill. You have to train.
Well, I'll tell you, that's one thing. When you and I went out and with our friend there, the ex-Navy SEAL, we trained. I really realized how little I knew about the gun when I was there, and when I was done, I was like, "Well, I need to continue this, and I should continue more training too." So.
And especially because we had about, I don't know, 15 or 17 guys there, and everybody's walking around with an AR or SIG, and you really, there's a lot that goes into safety.
Yeah. Mark and I have got a friend that's a former Navy SEAL, great guy, fantastic guy. And so he had us out there doing this tactical training. It was like 6 months ago or something, right? And,
we're out there 7 hours.
When he got started, he says, okay, you're designated as the guy that's tie the tourniquets, you're a designated driver. And I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? Like he was smart. He was prepared us. And he said, listen, we got live ammunition here. People get shot in training. Yeah. And that was a real eye opener for me, like to really, and they were great. Training us how to handle.
That's the pre-planning for the mission, because you got to look at it as a mission. Even if it was a practice day, we had one car parked with the keys in it, ready to go.
Yeah,
ready to go.
Oh, I remember the moment that came out of his mouth where he said that. I was like, "Oh man, this is the real deal." We're not.
We all put the nearest trauma units in our phone, so it was just a direct dial. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, good stuff. All right, so everybody, just to be clear, we are definitely, obviously, we are the opposite of condoning violence. We want you to stay away from violence. Absolutely. We don't want you getting in trouble with the law. We don't want you getting hurt. We don't want somebody else getting hurt. But if you've given everybody an opportunity to get away from you and they're threatening your life or the lives of your family, you need to be trained to know what to do. So, so it's a good idea. And this isn't free advertising for Mark, but he does this training. So again, Patriot Training System is Mark's company. There's lots of people out there that does it. Mark's not trying to get you to go to him. He wants you to be educated on how to take care of yourself. So.
And as always, if anybody has a question, please feel free to reach out, and
perfect.
We love that. Happy to help you.
Good deal. All right, Stud Muffin. Good to see you again. See you next week.
All right, guys.